is also a great way of learning about birds, because you'll probably see things in a photograph that you won't see in the field. And could be a different set of feathers, could be something I never realized in the field. Pipits always have nostrils that are uncovered, and larks have partially or fully covered nostrils, right? Things like these that you'll probably never realize in the field, but are only possible either if you have got the bird in hand or you have a clear, sharp photo of it. But I would recommend that you can get a lot out of a single photograph if it's taken in a series. I mean, out of photographs if it's taken in a series, right? And so if you, instead of just taking one photograph of a bird and expecting to know what it is, you'll know a lot more about the bird if you take multiple photographs over a period of time, right? And you'll be able to make a lot more sense of what the bird was doing, right? Yeah, that's about it. Any questions so far? Am I being clear as such? Cool. Okay. Of course, what's also important is probability of seeing. So if I'm in Hesarghatta, or well, let's pick Kaban Park actually. Let's pick Shubha ma'am's garden, and if there's a flycatcher, a lot of us won't think it's a Kashmir flycatcher, right? Probably the first flycatchers that come to mind are Tickle's blue, or a Asian brown in winter, or a red-breasted or something in the winter. And that's the right approach for it, because otherwise you won't be able to see what's different about a Kashmir flycatcher, right? But probability is very important. If it's knowing beforehand what birds you expect, what birds you have seen before, what birds others have seen. If you're in a dry landscape, you'll probably see a tawny pipit, right, running around on the ground. If you are in a little foresty patch with trees and stuff, you'll probably see a olive-backed pipit hanging about, right? And whether we like it or not, elimination is a big part of identifying birds, right? And it comes from knowledge you picked up from your own trips and observations, and it comes from knowledge of looking at other people's trips and observations. And you get an idea of, always, wherever you go, you always have an idea of what kind of things to expect. If I'm going to a lake, I expect waders, or I expect a tern, right? Or if I go to a park, I expect tailor birds and sunbirds to be very common, right? If I go to some place like IISc, I probably would expect a she-cravat, but even though they're not there, but it's something that comes automatically to us, right? So probability is important, but this is something, again, don't need to write down or something. It's something that you know, I think, right? Although, of course, if somebody's seen the bird a few days back, it's probably that same bird. You know, all helps knowing. Color. Ooh. So I do look at color, right? And I know there is a patch of olive here. I know there is a white line running through here. We call it a supercilium, but it's down to the color. I know there are black streaks running down all the way to the vent of this bird. This is a rosy pipit, right? Not very rosy in its winter plumage, right? But colors, when it comes to identifying a bird, are more important when seen in the context of the patterns they make. Like a chestnut-shouldered petronia having a yellow throat is important, but it's the fact that it makes a little blotch here. If it's the entire thing is yellow, it's probably not a chestnut-shouldered petronia, right? Colors define the patterns you see on birds, and it's important to probably note those colors, especially perhaps for warblers and stuff. But it's equally important to see how or what blocks of colors they form, what patterns they create. Is it a crown stripe on a warbler? Is it white? Is it yellow? That doesn't matter. Is there a crown stripe? It's the first step, right? And all of that is a green warbler. If you saw the photo earlier, it's got a yellowish wash to it, right? But the extent of the yellowish wash might tell you if it's a yellow-vented warbler or when you see a glimpse of it, or a green warbler, right? And it's very important to not just note down the color, but to see how it makes the bird what it is, right? Beyond that, I don't know much about color myself, so you're free to sort of see whatever you see or note down whatever you see, right? Of course, sound. A lot of birders place a lot of emphasis on sound a lot. Oh, I heard the call, you can tell it by call, or something, which is completely true. But it's quite frustrating for a young birder to hear that, because calls take practice, and calls probably require a lot more time than any of the other features that you can learn to note down, right? And also, I think there's a bit of a reluctance in us in general, that I have noticed, I might be wrong. We don't describe calls, right? We don't transcribe them on paper, hardly ever transcribe them, and we hardly ever are able to say a crow sounds like ah, or a tit sounds like a chi chi chi, or a metallic z z z, whatever, right? And while sounds are important, while it's important to note down sounds, if you hear it, if you hear a bird, I think they're given a lot more importance than they should be. I mean, there's no quick way of learning a bird's call. It comes from experience, probably repeatedly seeing a bird and seeing how it calls, noting it, perhaps, recording it. If you photograph a bird, you probably remember how your bird in the photograph looks, and you're better able to identify a similar looking thing next time. So recording calls definitely helps. In some species, calls are the primary way to distinguish between two birds. This is a Blythe's pipit here. This is a paddy field pipit again. And they look very similar. But if you hear a bird, if you hear either of these two, you'll probably be able to tell one from the other, right? But before I, for example, actually, so this is, can everybody hear this? This is a paddy field pipit, right? And this is a Blythe's pipit. And you can see the calls are very different, right? But there's no way I can remember these calls unless and until I learn to transcribe these calls, right? So being able to tell, again, your transcription needn't be the same as a Ramit or another field guide or whatever it is that you use, right? It needs to be something that you can understand. So what may be metallic to you may not be metallic to somebody else. What may be a chi 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 might be a ki 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 to somebody else. And all of these are very minor differences. And I think the best way to learn calls is to just transcribe them and have faith in your own transcriptions of calls, right? Because I've had birder friends, and we'll often talk to each other in bird language sometimes as a fun game. And we'll do this thing where we're like, pew, 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 or the other person will be like, pew, 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 and we think we're talking about different birds. And it's the same bird that we're talking about. What did you see? And we answer in bird calls. Try and understand the bird better, right? And but what I realized from this is we completely don't hear the same things at all. At times we hear very different things. That doesn't make our identification skill weaker. It just means we acknowledge the fact that birds may not sound the same to one person as they do to another, right? Again, I think sounds are very personal in nature. You should take them down. They definitely help, especially in forested areas or areas with dense cover. You can tell which bird is which bird just by hearing it. But they're not the end all be all of things, right? Okay. Something we don't emphasize on is learning the parts of a bird. Don't learn them from here. This is something I really like. It's an illustration I've always liked to keep with me. When you've always noticed the parts of the bird in the beginning of your field guide. Yeah, there's always a little topographical map of a bird about what part of a bird is what part. How many of us spend time there and look at what is what? Yeah, so anybody, yeah, that's very few people. How many of us know a scapular from a median covert, or the mantle from the vent, or a rump, right? Yeah, but the point being, it helps immensely to learn the parts of a bird. To not be able to tell another person, I saw something here, right? But to be able to tell, I saw that the median coverts were of this shape. You're able to completely visualize the bird better, right? For yourself and for others, right? And I think it's a pity, but we really do ignore I mean, I look at a lot of documentation about birds day in, day out, and people will mention things like, oh, around the neck, below the neck, a few centimeters down from the neck, this was seen, or this contrast was not present. And that is completely different to the mantle look very different from the back, let's say, right? Sorry. So these are the actual parts of the bird. And they won't, again, something that won't come immediately to you, but they can also tell you a lot about what bird you're seeing. So scapulars, for example, which are somewhere here, cover the median coverts, which is something here. Invaders, for example. I mean, these are things that you'll notice with time. While they don't cover the median coverts for pipits and larks, where the median coverts are the more prominent markers, right? Similarly, for example, we talk about things like wing bars. And, I for the longest time just considered wing bars to be a wing bar, to be a bar on a bird. I never look at them as the tips of the feather, right? And when you understand why a wing bar is a wing bar, you're able to understand, let's say, warblers far better, or molting patterns in warblers, right? And that's the other thing. Things like, very boring sounding things, like molting or aging a bird, right, are something I think we stay away from very often. And we leave to experts, wherever they are amongst us. And they'll tell you if a gull is a first-year gull or a second-year gull, or if this greenish warbler looks like this because in April it's a very worn-out bird, and that's why it looks just like a chip shaft right now, and stuff like that. But these are very easy things to learn. If you start making an effort towards learning why a bird looks like what it does, you will understand the bird so much better, and you'll understand why a juvenile is doing, I think, with the ultramarine flycatcher, for example, to be able to see that it's not a female but a juvenile. Let's say you look at the gape, slightly fleshy. You're able to tell in those 2 weeks it's probably the same bird if it's the same area, something to become something else. Or if you're able to see, understand that a juvenile paddy field pipit which has new feathers will have more streaking and hence is likely to be similar to a Richard's pipit or a Blythe's pipit. But when born out, it has a plain back and might be more similar to a tawny pipit, right? All of these things, they sound complex, but they're really not. And it just comes down to seeing the bird, right? It just comes down to not giving the responsibility of identifying a bird to somebody else, right? Which eventually might be the case. That's okay, right? But make an attempt, and that's the only way you can get better, right? I think that's about it. Any specific questions I'd love to answer or entertain, but yeah.
Generally, bird names, they are kept changing often.
Huh.
And some names are being changed frequently.
Right. Right.
It's a difficulty to remember.
So yeah, you don't. I think you don't have to move with. I mean, taxonomic revisions in general are probably useful in the sense that when you know when a new species might be another species, like you've been looking at the same species and it might get split into two birds. Let's say the greenish warbler and the green warbler became two birds. But on a whole, I mean, again, the names, the nomenclature of it is very secondary to actually identifying a bird. And I mean, that's up to you. I think I still use old names for a lot of birds. And I just don't think it's very important to sort of, if you were able to remember all the new names and all the new scientific names, a lot of people are, it's okay. If you're not, that's also okay because the burden itself doesn't change with the name.
Names change because booksellers want to sell their books. If you don't change the name, you will not buy the new book. It's all linked to economics.
Yeah.
I usually find it very difficult to transcribe calls. Like, if I've heard a word and if the same call is repeated, I know it's the same word, or I can identify two calls that this was my word, but I cannot transcribe or, I have to explain it to other people that what was the call that I heard, not recorded. I can't do that. So you have something for that.
No, I don't. But I mean, again, I mean, for your personal notes, just try it. If it helps, it's fine. Otherwise, use other alternatives. Could be recording a call, hearing it while you sleep, wake up in the morning with that call stuck in your mind or something. I don't know what might work. But it just comes down to being creative with what you're hearing or what you're seeing. And like I said, I mean, if you look at transcriptions in field guides, for example, and if I heard reading cysticolas around my house when I was younger, and I wrote down that calls as tick, 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 tick. And I look at a book and it says zit, 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 zit. And I still don't hear a zit, zit, zit. I only hear a tick, tick, tick. I hear a click, 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 click kind of thing, right? So it just comes down to what you hear. I mean, again, like I said, I think transcriptions are very personal to someone, and they might give you an idea in terms of what notes are there. A chi will always be an e. The syllables might be important to something, but calls are, I think, again, down to you, down to how you hear it, rather than how everybody wants to hear it. Yeah.
Ramit, I have got a question.
Yes, please.
I'll ask this question only if nobody else has.
Does anybody else have a question? Yes, please. Yeah, yeah.
Not directly related to the topic today.
That's okay.
But you're an expert in recording various audio calls of frogs.
I use my phone.
Just tips on a little bit more like you just said about transcribing a call may be difficult. So at least we can.
There's
Tips from your field experience.
nothing. I mean, I think it's I'll give you a short answer. Maybe we can discuss this afterwards properly. But I mean, recording calls, just if it's quiet enough and the word can be heard clearly. I use WhatsApp, for example. I keep sending these calls to my dad. I use the recording option on WhatsApp, and I just add the name of the bird at the end, and I send it to my dad, and he mails it to me later, and I just process it and use it. And so it's, I mean, there's a lot. It depends on how sophisticated you want to get with it. But if you really want basic tips, I mean, obviously it's important to have no noise, right? As quiet as possible around you. Every 3 meters towards a bird increases the volume of the bird, the default recording, by 2 decibels. So that's normally the rule I follow, 10 feet, essentially. So 10 feet closer to the bird means the recording would be much louder. That's all I know. Yeah, and no worries.
Ramit, I've got a question.
Yeah.
It's about philosophy.
Oh boy. Yes.
See, what is happening is that much of the people come out and give a very traditional view of identification.
Right.
That you need to go, you see this bird, you do that. Now, if I look through bird guides, why I am saying that is that I studied biology for me.
Right.
I sat on the bench listening to people for 17 years.
Right.
And out of that, I think, but for about maybe 5 years when I formally did have biology as a subject, I sat through biology right through.
Right.
The question now here is that do we require all this? Now, all this detailing was this descriptional detailing happened when technology was poor, when it was even difficult to reproduce an illustration in a book.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if you travel back in time to, say, the Fauna of British India series, you will find almost a feather by feather description. For the simple reason, reproducing illustrations in those times was difficult.
Right.
Now, much of these could be avoided by just writing a rough sketch,
Right.
and noticing it. Right through biology, if you have studied, and the problem comes, what I have noticed with all the people from engineering, who specifically engineering would
Yeah.
take a biology, they try to outdo the biologists in biology. Going and teaching what I would call classical ways of learning biology, which are outdated. Now, right through biology, one thing which was really important was making a sketch.
Right.
Right through our practicals, we were asked to make sketches. The point about making sketches is not that we would become artists. It's because we will start noticing things when we start filling up
Yep.
details.
Yep.
So if I can write a rough sketch of a bird and start putting arrow marks there and marking the details, then I don't require all this description, and which is easier.
Sure, sure.
So what I am saying is, for a beginner, it's always good to approach the easy way, which can we communicated. Today you can take a picture,
Yeah.
communicate. Was it possible earlier?
Um,
It wasn't. And today, Samba is here. You take a photograph of a tiger from any angle, you can literally strip the skin out of that photograph, make a digital impression, match it with other tigers in the world and say, where is this tiger from?
Right.
So that is where we are today. So why should we get stuck with what Jordan wants?
So, yeah, fair enough. I think sketching is important. And I said, if you note these things down, I'm actually sorry, I should have put it down as a sketch in the description bit. I didn't. I keep forgetting. I use sketches myself all the time. But I think in general, it's my job is to communicate what I know, and I think your job is to communicate what you know, and that's as plain as that. But yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think technology has been very beneficial in terms of, especially just reaching out to people like me, let's say, who are not from a biology background, and an understanding.
Just add one line to your slide presentation.
Yeah.
Either at the beginning or at the end.
Yeah.
Make life easy.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah.
But I have a counterpoint here. Now, do we need to really go back to sketching all the time? That is number one. Practically what happens is, if you are able to see a bird for, say, probably 1 second or 2 seconds continuously, at least most of the bush birds and the canopy birds and the tree birds, you see for fractions of a second. It's 99% of the time it's possible that you have missed out a lot of details. Number one. And then what happens is you close your eyes and try to visualize, and it's now imagination playing the trick as to what you saw. Most of the time. If I had to, for example, that issue which we both have been discussing on the Jordan's
Correct.
field bird.
Correct.
If I had written a sketch, I would have been standing on my head and say it is Jordan's only. Because I am very clear, I visualize whatever I wanted to see.
Sure, and
I keep sketching it that way. Because I see the bird for a fraction of a second.
I think that's just down to pure honesty. I mean, I've had times where I've seen birds and I've only noted so much, and I only note that much down. And I think something that's probably worth mentioning.
Don't tell your point on that.
Something that's worth mentioning. A is, I mean.
Engineers and non-engineers always have.
No, here it's a matter of like naval commander giving an instruction and saying this is a bird. I say so.
No, sorry. I am a naval commander, not a bird commander.
But
Bird commander is standing there.
no, please don't. No, it's we have time.
Grouped in orders, but not
Answer your
in
question
orders.
very briefly.
If
Now,
5
let's
minutes.
say you are noticing your friend walking ahead of you. You are not seeing all the details of him. You are not even seeing his face. So you are able to identify that person with reduced information because you are familiar with it. It is called as the psychology of reduced cues. Any PUC level psychology textbook will give that. So basically what happens is that as you start becoming more and more familiar with the bird, or anything, you are able to identify it with less and less details. That's how the mind works, because you are pattern matching in the mind.
So that is your imagining.
If you are not imagining, you are
That's what
pattern
it is.
matching. It's
No,
like
no, no.
something you
See,
see.
I don't want to hijack the session there, but if you look at facial recognition as
Yeah.
a computer science problem,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
it doesn't work the way you're telling.
Can this be taken outside afterwards? Yeah. Thank you. Anything else? Again, it's I can go into details of birds, and I'm sure Krishna sir can get into it even deeper.
No.
No, but again, I think it's very important to know this. What's relevant to you is what you want to know. It's as simple as that. Again, I understand that I think a lot of us bird because we enjoy birding,
Yeah, biology is a mean.
and everything else can be ignored at your convenience. Okay, awesome. Anything else? Is that it? Awesome. Okay, thank you so much.
First of all, we need to appreciate Ramit for giving us an insight. In fact, Dr. George would have said the same thing. Don't watch birds, but observe them. And he's also emphasizing on the same thing. And the most important thing is he has got a running fever of 102, and still he made it here and gave this talk. Thank you very much.
Countering Krishna's point, engineers are taught to make drawings, not sketches.
Oh, there. Yeah. Figuring out
The history of birdwatching in Bangalore. And 2 documents there will help you to focus on the subject of Ramit's talk, identification of difficult species, right? So we have extracts of one article by Dr. M.B. Krishna along with sketches by Dr. Subramanya on the waders, and then we also have one more booklet which was prepared by Dr. Subramanya on the waders of Bangalore. So Warblers by Krishna, with sketches by Subhi, and the waders book by Dr. Subramanya. So
this is one point I'd like to add. What happened was that when I was working on warblers, because it was a difficult group, Dr. George came up with the idea that we could meet after birdwatching sessions and discuss about different groups on different days. And the whole thing came out of a talk which I gave after birdwatching on warblers. What I would like to suggest as a takeoff is that if you have groups of people whom you can form a cluster with, please do interact, have meeting sessions so that you sit and discuss, say, traditional problems. This whole Wagner article came because of a particular meeting, and at the end of the meeting, Dr. George said you should write. So, exchange ideas, and that's what I would say